So let's talk multiple representation. Multiple representation is when a realtor is basically representing both sides in a transaction. Typically, a realtor would represent a buyer and then another realtor is going to represent the seller. Now, there's two ways you can get into multiple representation. Either there's my listing and there's an agent in my office that represents a buyer, so we're not doing the same side in terms of me representing both people. However, it's still in my office, so that's considered multiple representation. The other way is if it does go that way, and it happens in our area quite frequently, a buyer doesn't have their own realtor, so they call the listing agent and they view the property. They decide, yes, I'd like to put in an offer. Well, there's a few things that need to happen. First of all, there needs to be permission granted from all parties. So my seller has to say, yes, Melissa, no problem, go ahead with the offer. The buyer has to say, yes, Melissa, go ahead, you can represent us and write it up. So then what that means is we have to be extra careful about confidentiality. So as always, we need to keep important information to ourselves. There's certain things that need to be disclosed. They're called material facts. So if there's a problem with water in the basement or anything that's really relevant to this particular home, there's certain things that have to be disclosed no matter who represents who. But things like motivation, so how high you'll go, how low you'll go, you're desperate to have that house, you're desperate to get out of that house. Those are the kinds of things that we need to keep to ourselves, especially carefully when it's multiple representation. The other thing that happens is if I have a buyer and they're looking for my guidance with where to start on an offer, I can show them comparables, we can talk about the market, but ultimately I can suggest to them if they want me to, well, you know what, why don't we start at this number and then see where it goes from there. Same thing with a seller. They can say to me, well, Melissa, what do you think of the offer? Should I accept it? And I can say to them, you know what, I really do think that it's a fair offer because, and show them all the reasons why maybe they're getting more than I thought they would. So those things are out the window with multiple representation. What happens is both sides, I show them comparable sales, market information, what's been factual about what's been happening in our area for what things have sold for, but they need to make up their own mind. So my seller will say to me, well, you know, what do you think? And I refer back to the information, and they really need to come up with their own price that they're willing to accept. Same thing for my buyer. They need to look at what the information I've provided to them tells them about what this type of house might be quote unquote worth on the market. And then in the end, as always, it's the buyer themselves and the seller themselves that decide what a house is going to sell for. I can give advice, I can counsel along the way, but ultimately those two parties who are paying for and accepting money for the house are the ones that make that final decision. It's not something to be scared of if it's done right. I'm very comfortable with multiple representation, as are a lot of realtors. And believe me, if it's not something that the realtor you're working with is comfortable with, they're going to tell you. But in the end, just know this. You are the one in the driver's seat. You need to be sure that you're comfortable with the realtor you're working with and make sure that you understand what multiple representation means. If you're working with me or you want to work with me, feel free to give me a call and I'd be happy to discuss this or any other real estate term with you.